That's it, I'm getting my flipper. High-grade emissions. Nobody likes them, but everyone has to run them. The new SEO drives has taken some of the sting off of HGE farming, but it's still a chore. 99% of people will probably use an ASP Explorer for their HGE farming, and why wouldn't they? Highly maneuverable with a great jump range, it seems like a natural fit. But there's barely any internals in this thing, and whoever designed the brakes on it was in a love affair with the bottle. Before we go any further, we have to ask ourselves what a ship actually needs for farming HGEs, and when you think about it for more than a minute, you'll realize that an exploration class jump range isn't really useful here. HGEs only spawn in the bubble. The correct type of system in the correct state is never going to be more than 150 light years away. Basically, any ship that isn't fitted for combat will have the jump range to zip about to where you need to be in about 2 to 3 jumps. The most important part of farming HGEs is to run the game on an NVMe hard drive with the latest protocol and a motherboard that supports it. But that's decidedly pay to win, so we'll discuss the actual in-game mechanics for this video. What we really need is 3 things. Cargo hold big enough to carry a lot of limpets, multiple limpet controllers, preferably enough to rapidly deploy 5 limpets at a time in order to scoop up spawns as fast as possible, and good Supercruise maneuverability. And that's where the elephant steps into the room. Buckle up because we're about to dive into buried and esoteric stat values. Every ship in the game has a predetermined set of values for how maneuverable it is in Supercruise. These values are indelible and will not change respective to cargo mass or thruster strength. A cutter carrying 720 tons of cargo and D-rated thrusters handles in Supercruise identically to one with an empty hold and A-rated dirty-tuned drag drives. This is an important aspect of the game to know in general, and the fact that these values aren't surfaced is not the best. The values aren't known exactly, but community testing has come up with a spreadsheet which I'll link in the description. Also have noticed the fact that maneuverability changes depending on throttle value. The reason why we're interested in this stat is because a large part of refreshing HGE spawns is doing a U-turn in Supercruise to return back to your starting position as fast as possible. More sluggish ships will have to spend more time doing this maneuver, which is a primary factor that invalidates ships like the Anaconda from being the king of material gathering. The main problem here is that without enough turn rate, we end up orbiting the position we started at rather than returning to it, which requires driving away and then turning back, which costs a lot of time. And for HGEs, the amount of time per spawn is important, as a ship that can refresh fast might get more refreshes of pharmaceutical isolators than one that doesn't. I've never seen a pharma spawn with more than 14 minutes on the clock. I'm sure you're familiar with the basics of HGEs, but the refresh maneuver requires charging your FSD the instant you log in and then boosting so that it engages as fast as possible. From here, the technique can vary depending on your ship, but in a highly maneuverable ship, it's fastest to keep your throttle at 0 and pitch upward. It's tempting to engage the throttle to the butter zone for better turning speed, but since you have to spend time out of the butter zone to get there, you end up putting more distance between you and the spawn and end up wasting time. A clean refresh takes no time at all. It should come as no surprise that small class ships have the best stats for Supercruise. The ASP Explorer punches above its weight for pitch rate, while having a generally awful yaw rate. Still, the ASP is able to make the loop-the-loop maneuver just about as fast as necessary, and anything slower really starts to lose time. Where the ASP falls short is its limpet capacity. It can't get many limpets out quickly or carry that many while having things like a fuel scoop or shields, which means you have to spend time waiting on collection. I combed through this list for a while trying to find a successor. I looked up years-old posts on Reddit for suggestions. One guy said that the Dolphin is the best at it, and then I saw it. A ship with even better Supercruise stats than the ASP. The Federal Assault Ship. I'm kidding, of course. The FAST might have great handling, but its internals are pathetic. Instead, today we're looking at the Imperial Clipper, a reputation-locked ship that you found at the bottom of your box of Imperial cutters. If you haven't reached the reputation to fly one of these, I recommend Robigo Mines or Thargoid rescue missions. You can make boatloads of cash and engineering materials while getting the rep you need. Now, the pitch rate of the Clipper is measurably slower than the ASP. Not by a lot, mind you. However, the Clipper has yaw control like you've never seen, and it can rotate fully via yaw more than twice as fast as the Asp. Why is this important? Because if you paid attention in flight school, you'll know that the fastest way to turn a ship is to combine pitch and yaw by rolling your target in the diagonal direction. With the combination of pitch and yaw, the Clipper can make a U-turn faster than the Asp, despite being larger, heavier, and having dramatically bigger internal compartments. Which is why I call it the Imperial Clipper. We can fit 128 collector limpets in that Class 7 cargo rack and still fit a Class 6 fuel scoop, Class 4 FSD booster, and 3 controllers to plop out 5 collector limpets in a blink. Here's a tip from me. Don't skimp on the shields on HGE builds. There's exactly one shipwreck in each spawn that does not move under any circumstances and can damage you pretty badly if you collide with it. The exact type of shipwreck is randomized, and only some of them have collision boxes. But due to the debris field and the darkness, it can be pretty hard to properly avoid taking a few on the chin now and then. I'm actually considering upgrading my A-rated enhanced shields to reinforced prismatics, but that's definitely overkill. Just A-rate it, use enhanced or reinforced, and then high cap for the experimental. Using this build and running the game on an NVMe, each HGE refresh takes almost exactly 2 minutes, which will let you milk any spawn to full. And with this many limpets, we can actually afford to skip the return to station and instead go to chase a different kind of HGE, potentially multiple times without having to restock. Sitting down and doing the math, knowing that each material gathered contains 3 materials, if we were to be farming Imperial shielding from scratch, we need 34 collector limpets deployed to scoop them all up as fast as possible. But under the worst case scenario, we'll say that we get only 3 spawns a pop and we blow all 5 limpets each time. This means that we spend 55 limpets over 22 minutes and we still have 73 limpets in our hold. Or in other words, more than enough limpets to do the same thing again to a different kind of HGE. Improvised components can actually only drop 2 per spawn, messing up the math a little bit, and then there's mixed spawns like proto-radiolic alloys and core dynamics composites that might not drop them at all sometimes. But suffice it to say that this build enables us to completely fill up on 2 to 3 different kinds of grade 5 materials before having to waste time docking to restock. What's also great about this build is that it's relatively affordable. The Class 6 fuel scoop will make up half the cost of the build if you A-rate it, but you can always B-rate it to cut the cost by 75%, bringing the purchase price for all components, assuming best discounts, from $57 million down to just $39 million. Despite being a gigantic and ostentatious beast, the Flipper is much cheaper than a Python's basic purchase price, even when it's fully kitted out. And while engineering will always make a ship better, for raw function the only engineering this ship actually needs is more range on the FSD, which is true for any ship. It's super simple to just go out and make an Imperial Flipper, so long as you already have the reputation unlocked. With our hull fully laden down with limpets, we get a respectable 44 light-years of jump range, or 53 light-years when empty. Believe me, it's more than enough. My personal haunt is the Chernobog system, a very small Empire-owned system that I've found to spawn Imperial shielding, HGs reliably, and never more than 6,000 light seconds from the star. Less than 10 light-years away is... Aske? Aske. Aske is a great system because it's a Federation system just one short jump from Empire space, and it contains a manufactured material trader while also spawning core dynamic composite HGEs. A reliable and fast Imperial shielding spawn is honestly enough to trade down for other materials. It saves a lot of time. If you're watching this years in the future, the allegiances of these systems may have changed, in which case I am now sad. The point is that jump range doesn't save as much time as a well-lubricated farming machine. One jump in this game is just 1 minute of time. The amount of time saved from refreshing instances faster and not having to restock limpets is going to outweigh 1 or 2 more jumps getting into position. I've been using this build for months, and I don't think I could go back. I had actually been using it for weeks before I realized that I could do even more. Chuck a few remote release flak launchers in the nacelles, and this build is now perfect for scooping up raw materials from the new raw material loop that's closer to the bubble. I'd recommend stocking your limpets at a fleet carrier on site though. Screw it, let's throw a wake scanner on there too. This ship is fast enough to scum some free data mined wake exceptions when we're running around. Just about the only engineering-related activity that I don't use this ship for is the Jameson crash site. That's still the ASP Exploder's domain, as the Flipper's profile is too large to make surface landings efficiently. Not to throw shade on the ASP, but for exploration it's been power-crept by the Crate Phantom. For HGEs, I'd rather use the Flipper, and the Neutron Superhighway is and always has been decidedly the domain of the 87 light-year Anaconda. For most sane and productive people, the ASP is all that you need to farm HGEs, and you should definitely use one. But there's no shortage of commanders out there who always ask themselves if they could get just a little more. FDev has said that they are considering reworking how engineering works. Something about making it more accessible? At this point, it wouldn't surprise me if what they meant was just the new pay-to-win pre-engineered ships, but I'll be keeping my ear to the ground in case the methods for gathering are suddenly upset, and the Flipper needs to be put into deep storage.